that on with this healthcare funding package? I mean, I'm curious about any notable cuts that might be within there where we're shuffling priorities from one thing to another, and that doesn't really come across in the
So I think that there's absolutely some trade-offs in this budget. I think that the governor, as she's looking at what she needed to do, has increased the K through 12 budget. The K through 12 budget in the balanced budget is actually about $200 million higher than what current service level is. It's recognizing in current law we have a split of the state school fund 50-50 between the 2 school years. The biggest component of what the governor's done is actually recognize that school districts probably spend more money in the second year than they do in the first year, just because of how personnel costs manage, school districts manage their costs. So we have about $200 million more in the K through 12 system. The way we funded that is that we have actually flat funded a series of other things. Higher education system, generally speaking, is relatively flat funded with the current biennium. So they don't have a lot of growth built into that budget. That is where you get into the investment side, is that if you actually look at this investment plan, the $1.9 billion, with Lindsay and Pooja will be able to speak to you about more specifically, that's where you see the large investments coming. So I think the governor had to make some choices about how to balance the resources we had, shore up the piece of the system, K through 12 education, that was really in need, and deal with some other critical issues. Housing is absolutely a critical issue that's been involved. Governor's invested significant resources, both through bonding and general fund and lottery fund, to shore up that system. But in essence, those are much smaller adjustments and are not going to make the truly dramatic change that you see in the investment proposal that she's brought forward.
She called that a historic investment in housing. Can you speak to that? I mean, do we know this is the most in anybody?
So I will let actually James LaBarre deal with those questions. He's the policy advisor in the housing area, and they're ready. And I think a lot of the questions you're asking are actually better aimed at the policy advisors who have all the detail of what you're specifically looking for. I think our aim is really about the big picture budget, to give you that context and let them handle the more specifics.
George, I have a big picture question.
Sure.
So I just wanted to circle back on the education investments. So I've only looked at the overview of the budget so far, so forgive my not having read the whole thing.
Yeah.
But the $2 billion, so that is an investment that would be, it's not accounted for in the balanced budget?
Correct.
Okay.
That would be an additional investment. And from our perspective, that really is what she's proposing to the legislature. In essence, you have, this is what we can fund within the existing resources with a few relatively small tweaks.
So the flat funding for higher ed, that is in order to boost education spent K-12 even before the $2 billion?
In order to get to $200 million above CSL in the balanced budget, yes.
And that could lead to outsized tuition hikes, is that right? If that was left as is without any additional investment? I mean,
that would where we'd have to have conversations with what would actually be happening.
Just clarifying on Hillary's question, so there was a reinvestment in K through 12 in the balanced budget before you even asked for the additional $2 billion from the legislature?
That's correct. But that will, in essence, get into a conversation. So I think realistically, from a school district, they will probably say that a 50-50 split between their 2 school years probably doesn't cover what their real costs are in the second year. So I think from a school district perspective, they would argue that that increase of $200 million above current service level isn't really buying new things. It's really recognizing what they believe their true costs to be in what they're really doing today.
Why would costs go up in the second year, except for maybe inflation aside? Is that the kind of use it or lose it mentality?
No, I don't think so at all. I don't think so at all. I think if you look at a business, for example, they give employee compensation changes. If you do it in the first year, you're paying for it for an entire biennium, 2 years in a row. If you have a compensation change that happens in the second year, then you haven't actually paid for it in the first biennium. You're picking up both compensation adjustments in the second year of the biennium. Likewise, if there's changes in the number of kids that are enrolled, if you have more kids that are coming into your school district, they don't come in as just a big stair step, all of them on day one. We have the same thing in our human services programs. They kind of feed in over time. So really what that is, the split between 49 and 51 is recognizing their costs really are probably higher in the second year.